Hey everybody, this is Matthew Essington here with Tabletop Shenanigans. Welcome to episode 3 of our Battle Ready videos. Today I'm going to be showing you how to optimize your movement phase. So let's get right to it. But before we get into today's video, make sure you smash that like button, subscribe, hit the bell icon so you know when we have some exciting new content for you. Thanks so much. So today I set up some scenarios to showcase some of the common pitfalls that you may run into in the movement phase and how to best navigate them. So on the topic of trying to see the bigger picture and changing the mind of thought for movement, this right here, this particular scenario I set up, I'm playing as the guard. Obviously, my objective is to move my unit from this position onto the objective. So I'll be holding an additional objective. I'll be able to raise the banners and hold the objective to score more points later in the game. However, if you're not seeing the whole picture and not considering your next move, what you're moving into is inevitable death. So over here, we have a squad of Harlequins set up. Now, they're very far away at this point. However, if I'm going to move on to this objective on my turn, not paying attention over here, I'll be able to move my 6 inches plus advancing, and then obviously be able to issue myself an order with the commander there to ensure that I get onto the objective. However, you have Harlequins over here who have a 8-inch movement. Plus they can advance and charge, of course. So they can move up to an additional 6 inches, more than likely 3 inches. With their Shadow Seer over here, they'll be able to issue them or cast a spell to be able to move again. So another 8 inches with the potential to advance again, putting them at about 2 inches to 1 inch away with an inevitable, unfailable charge. Now a unit of 5 Harlequins most likely are going to kill 10 guardsmen in combat. Kind of just nullifying everything that you did. You just basically threw away points and allowed the Harlequins player to control the objective going into your turn. Another thing to consider, obviously depending on your secondary objectives, if one of my secondary objectives is, well, I need to hold this at the end of the turn, I might be willing to sacrifice 50 points of guard to control this at the end of the turn to score an additional whatever amount of points it is, 4 points or whatever. However, if my objective is just to hold this later on in the game for a secondary or for primaries, or my opponent's only on 2 objectives and I'm just trying to take a 3rd objective, but I don't necessarily need the points and I'd like them to stay alive, is I can move them in such a way that they probably won't get charged, or if my opponent does decide to charge them, that he would have to move off the objective, nullifying his advantage completely. So I could move them in such a way where they're in position for next turn that if he did go ahead and pull that maneuver, not thinking ahead like I am, and moved his 16 inches forward to move on to the objective, then on the next turn with my commander nearby, I could move, be shooting in rapid fire range, issue myself first rank fire, second rank fire, and just kill them in a volley of shots. If I didn't kill them all, I could then even charge them, more than likely to survive and having more units on the objective going forward. So 2 other things I want to talk to you about today are moving for line of sight and moving to line of sight. So in the 2 separate scenarios, scenario 1, I have my knight right over here. What I'd want to do if I'm playing the knight is I'd want to move him centrally in the middle of the table. He has a lot of guns and he has some pretty big nasty guns. If I move him to the center of the table, it's going to open up his alleys of shooting. He's going to get more line of sight on more areas of the table. It's going to make him more effective, more useful. He's going to be able to charge stuff next turn. Now, if I'm playing as the Harlequins over here and my opponent just put a big knight in the center of the table and I need to move to the objective, you definitely want to play for line of sight. So when you're trying to calculate stuff as you're moving, I wouldn't want to finish my move here. Even if I rolled an advance roll, like say I didn't have my Shadow Seer over here with this unit here. And if they were inside the building here, outside of line of sight currently, and I was trying to move them across the table, with their 8-inch move, I'm nearly there. Say if I rolled a 6, I would definitely get onto the objective and out of line of sight of that big knight for next turn. So if I had this unit right here, I would roll to advance them. If I rolled anything less than exactly what I needed, at no point in time do you ever have to move in the direction that you've decided that you want to move. If I roll a 14 or if I roll a 6, I'm definitely going to move them the 14 inches that direction. Say I rolled a 1, which is 9 inches. Even though I'm getting closer to my objective, I most certainly would not want to end my turn right there, because when this squad finishes moving, they're all going to be right there. And the big knight with all his guns are just gonna point and delete. So if I rolled anything but what I needed to get into line of sight, I'd most likely just decide to stay still or move back an inch, move further out of line of sight, just keeping in mind where the knight can potentially move and what is going to be his line of sight next turn. So thinking ahead about what not only he can see this turn or now, but what he's going to be able to see next turn when he moves. At no point in time is it against the rules to ask your opponent questions about any of his models on the tables or any of their abilities and spells. You always want to keep in mind things like, can this unit advance and charge? Can this unit be warp timed? Can this unit be Twilight Pathway to move an additional time or advance and charge still? I mean, all that information, continually asking your opponent so you don't forget throughout the game, because you don't want to get caught in a moment where your opponent neglects to tell you something before you make your move and you get caught in the gotcha moment. I also want to talk a little bit about knowing exactly what your opponent can do. It's very important to always know exactly what your opponent can do. It never hurts to ask 10, 20, 30 times your opponent what they can do. Like say in this scenario right here, if I was playing as that guard unit, I would not want to move out of cover if I knew that this unit could both advance and charge. So with a 20-inch movement, they can close that gap very quickly, and they'd still be able to charge if they're white scars. If I had moved any closer, obviously I'd be charged right now with a very short, easy to do charge. Same thing over here with my Harlequins over here that I have set up. With a 20-inch movement, I'd be able to get these guys all the way across the table over here, or even possibly even closer, like right here, making a very, very short charge. If I move them at all any closer, it would basically be a free charge for my opponent. Even though he's all the way tucked back here in the corner, not being shot at, the ability to move and charge, not understanding that he can do that and moving into range could cost you a lot. Understanding if your opponents can advance and still shoot. So whereas white scars bites definitely cannot advance and shoot. So in this particular circumstance, both those units would be very safe. As far as for shooting, because I can only move 14 inches and still shoot my weapons. At no point would either of those squads still be in line of sight. Now, however, if I was playing against a different opponent, like say Harlequins, and they're Skyweavers, which most certainly can advance and shoot. They also have a further advance, and they ignore terrain with their flying keyword. They could move 22 inches across the table diagonally and still be able to shoot. So any of these targets would not be safe at that point. It would definitely change my game plan of where I'm going to move those units to protect them against a unit like this, as opposed to a unit like this. So understanding and asking your opponent the questions, what can your guys do? Can they be warp timed? Can they be Twilight Pathwayed? Can they move and shoot? Can they move and charge? Can they advance and shoot? Those are all very important questions that you need to know and understand and ask all the time. I wanted to also talk to you guys today about considering heroic interventions. Now, most people, when they consider heroic interventions, it's used as a countercharge measure done after your opponent has declared all charges. What a lot of people don't remember is that heroic intervention doesn't require the charge to be made. If I were to just move this squad of guys within 3 inches of Mortarion, at the end of the charge phase, he'll be able to declare a heroic intervention into the unit if they're within 3 inches. So one thing always to consider is if you need to take this objective to stop him from scoring points on his turn, is that you have the ability in most cases, because objectives are typically going to be, well, always going to be 6 inches across from each other. So one thing I would want to do in this particular scenario is I'd want to move them in such a way, obviously they would need to advance, but move them up 6 inches, even without advancing, just being able to issue the order, move, 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 to move them an additional 6 inches. I just want to make sure that the entire squad finish their movement outside of 3 inches of Mortarion. You always want to be aware though, because a lot of armies have abilities to bump that heroic intervention up to 6 inches. In that case, I definitely would not move anywhere near Mortarion. I'd just give up the 5 points, hold my ground here, just because he's just going to get free kills. Next thing I want you to consider is always trying to stay within range of auras, especially depending on which army you are and what auras they are. Now, like with Harlequins, the auras that come off a single Shadow Seer are kind of make or break for the army. Now, it does have the added benefit of having a 9-inch bubble, which makes the aura a lot easier to stay within for a lot more units. But one thing I always do suggest with units with auras, or trying to stay within said auras, is going to be to move the model with the aura first. It's going to make your life a whole lot easier. So if I were to move this Shadow Seer up 8 inches without advancing, I don't know why I wouldn't advance, but in this case, I'm not going to advance. One thing I'll be able to do then, when I go to move the rest of these units, I'll be able to actually measure out 9 inches. So if I need to stay within a 9-inch bubble to keep my range here, I know that the corner of this building is going to be within 9 inches. So I'll be able to move them 8 inches forward here to be within 9 inches of that bubble. It's going to keep them protected with the shield from harm ability, as well as from reducing the range with the Shadow Stone. Same thing over here, same concept. I can see exactly how far I can move them up the table while keeping that whole squad within my 9-inch aura. So I know it's going to be about here at this corner of the building. When I measure here, I can see that I'm going to be at that corner of the building. So I can safely move this squad forward to hold the objective. In both cases, hold the objective while remaining within my aura. So now with a 9-inch aura, it's going to be a lot easier, obviously, to keep 2 units that are spread 18 inches apart within that aura. With a 6-inch aura, it's going to take a lot more maneuvering. One thing that comes to mind is the Custodes. They have the aura Aquilus that gives them -1 to hit. It's huge on an army that's already toughness 5 with a 2-up armor save. So being able to move that unit first, even if you're going to advance him forward, that lets you know that if you advance him, you need to keep everybody else in mind as well. So if he rolls like a 6, you probably don't want to roll that full 6 forward. Same thing, if you started with the other units, they all rolled 6s and you move 12 inches forward, and then he only rolls like a 1 and moves 7 inches forward, he's going to be way behind the pack to keep that aura up with him. It may not be that turn that he loses the aura, but turn 3 and 4 after that, not being with the aura can make a big difference. So earlier we talked a little bit about why we shouldn't have moved our Kadashan squad forward onto the objective, because of a countercharge, obviously, by the Harlequins. Kind of looking at it on the flip side of things though, if I was playing the Harlequins player and I saw this super easy charge, it's almost like bait. It's too easy. So one thing that I'm considering is I'm considering the range of this Hellhound right here. So the Hellhound right now, if it moved its full movement forward, 12 inches, would not be within range of the Harlequins unless if they move forward. Now, obviously, if I went ahead and did my full movement forward, my whole 8 inches in, plus my advanced, and then got a nice little easy 2-inch charge there, I'd be able to kill that squad of Kadashan. However, on the flip side, this beautiful little Hellhound here would then just roll forward and inject flame directly into the Harlequin. And it would not be very pretty at all for the Harlequins. So when I'm considering stuff like that, I'd probably want to wait that turn. You can wait a whole turn to kill some guard. Just tuck in more to the building so they're out of line of sight even if they move. The only way that they would ever get to shoot at you is if they did a move in advance and then did forward for the Emperor, and you'd probably only have a couple in line of sight. So weather the small storm until you can get your jet bikes or something else into play that could take care of something like a Hellhound before it had the opportunity to shoot. Ideally, you'd want to kill it when it's about here, so when it blows up, it kills everything else. But take that into effect for anything. It doesn't matter. I know I'm using a lot of Guard and Harlequin here because that's what I have, but it doesn't matter what you're playing against. You're thinking about not only what does this unit do, what you can charge, but what does that next rank do? How far can he move? How far can he shoot? When I move forward, am I going to be in range of this gun? Am I going to be able to safely assault this unit without being attacked by everything else? Am I willing to sacrifice that unit to take this objective this turn? There's a lot of things to take into consideration aside from just what you see directly in front of you. It's all about seeing the bigger picture, the next move, because you're playing 5 rounds. You're not playing 1 round. You're not playing to take this objective. You're playing to score more points than your opponent. So before you move, ask yourself, what's your objective? Are you trying to get to an objective on the battlefield? Are you trying to kill a tank for bring it down? Are you trying to kill units for thin their ranks? Ask your opponent any questions that you might have. Can that unit advance and charge? Can they advance and shoot? Do they need line of sight to shoot? Do they have spells that allow them to move more times and still be able to charge? Range. Always measure ranges. There's no rules that says you can't measure the entire table 100 times before you make one move. Just don't be that guy. Range. Understand not only how far your opponent's model can move, but any weapons that they have on them or special abilities or spells that they can cast, exactly what the distance they are. So that way you can measure that distance plus their movement to determine if you're going to be safe from that or if you need to move your models in accordance. Measure. Measure, measure, measure. Measure twice, move once. It's important. It doesn't hurt to measure a bunch of times. That way you understand that your opponent isn't in range. Make sure that when you do that, you can show your opponent, hey, even after you move, you're not going to be in range because the tape measure says so. Line of sight. Line of sight, super important. Whether you're in line of sight, whether you're out of line of sight, whether you have line of sight to a target, you want to make sure that you are exactly what you want, whether you're trying to shoot at somebody or whether you're trying not to be shot at somebody. Charge. When you make your move, are you going to be able to charge your opponent? Are they going to be able to countercharge you? And the very last thing, heroic intervention. Are you going to be within heroic intervention of your range? This goes back to ask. Make sure your opponent doesn't have a stratagem that's going to increase the heroic intervention up to 6 inches. Hopefully this will help you out in future movement phases in all of your future games. Don't forget to always move with a purpose. Understand what you're going to do and why you're doing it. If you like this video and would like to see more videos like this or different content, let us know in the comments below.